All right, so let's dive into something a little bit different today. Picture this, okay? A nation, over 120 million people, right in the heart of East Africa, and just brimming with potential. But there's a catch. They're landlocked. Ethiopia, huge ambitions. But this one geographical hurdle is it's a major roadblock to their economic growth. They're cut off from the very sea that could, really fuel their development. Yeah, I don't know. It's like having all the ingredients for this amazing meal, but no way to get them to the table. Yeah, and the irony is, Ethiopia wasn't always landlocked. Decades ago, they had a coastline along the Red Sea. Ports like Assab and Massawa were their lifelines to global trade. Then Eritrea gained independence in '93. And almost overnight, Ethiopia became the largest landlocked nation in the world. The implications of such a sudden shift were immense, both politically and economically. Wow, yeah, that's a huge adjustment to have to make. So what do you do when the rug is pulled out from under you like that?
Sure.
You got to get creative, right? And it seems like Ethiopia's answer to that is to turn those limitations into opportunities. And that brings us to the recent agreement with Somaliland, specifically regarding access to the port of Berbera. This has the potential to be a game changer, doesn't it?
Absolutely. It's not just about securing access to the sea. It's about strategic diversification. Right now, over 90% of Ethiopia's maritime trade flows through Djibouti. That kind of dependence can be precarious, especially given the volatile nature of the region. Berbera offers an alternative route, a safety net, you could say, and a chance to renegotiate the dynamics of trade in the Horn of Africa.
Okay, so it's less about replacing Djibouti and more about
having
options, right? Not putting all their eggs in one basket.
Yeah.
But what's the real driving force behind this agreement for Ethiopia?
Well, it boils down to economic ambition. Ethiopia has a rapidly growing economy, with a huge young population eager to connect to global markets. And to achieve their economic goals, they need reliable and efficient access to global trade routes. Berbera, situated on key international shipping lanes, offers precisely that.
Okay, so it's a calculated move, not just a desperate scramble for a port. It's a smart strategy. But what's in it for Somaliland? Why roll out the red carpet for Ethiopia?
Well, Somaliland, while not recognized internationally, has been strategically developing the port of Berbera for years. This agreement with Ethiopia injects much-needed capital and transforms Berbera into a major trade hub. Think about it. Ethiopia's consumer market is massive, and this opens a direct pipeline for Somaliland's own industries, like livestock, agriculture, minerals, to reach not just Ethiopia, but potentially the entire world through this trade corridor.
So it's a chance for Somaliland to finally get a seat at the table, to leverage their resources, and gain some global recognition in the process.
Exactly. And the way they've gone about this is even more remarkable, rather than resorting to territorial disputes and conflicts, which often plague these kinds of pursuits. Ethiopia and Somaliland have opted for a peaceful and collaborative approach.
That's fascinating. You'd think with something as vital as sea access, nations would be in each other's throats. But instead, they're saying, hey, let's figure this out. Let's find a way we both benefit. What's the thinking behind such a peaceful approach?
Well, it's a strategic calculation for sure, but it's also a reflection of Ethiopia's growing influence in the region. They understand that conflict is rarely a sustainable solution. By choosing diplomacy and mutual benefit, they're positioning themselves as a stabilizing force, a reliable partner, and that has significant implications for attracting investment and fostering economic growth.
Okay, so it's not just about, warm, fuzzy feelings. It's a calculated move to establish themselves as the responsible leader in the region. But let's get practical for a moment. This agreement with Somaliland, what are the nuts and bolts? What are the key provisions that make it tick?
Well, at the heart of the agreement is the Memorandum of Understanding, or MOU. It lays out a framework for cooperation, including things like joint investment in infrastructure, streamlined customs procedures, and even the potential for a free trade zone.
So imagine trucks loaded with Ethiopian coffee and textiles, smoothly making their way to Berbera, ready to ship out to the world. And in return, ships bringing in essential goods, technology, resources, fueling Ethiopia's growth. It's like opening up a major artery for trade and development, wouldn't you say?
Exactly. And the benefits go beyond just these two nations. Think about neighboring countries like Kenya and South Sudan. They also gain access to a more efficient trade route. It could create a ripple effect of economic growth, pulling the entire Horn of Africa into a more prosperous future.
So we're talking about a potential transformation of an entire region, but surely a project of this magnitude. faces its share of obstacles, right?
Without a doubt, there are logistical complexities, infrastructural challenges, and the ever-present shadow of regional politics to navigate. Plus, Somaliland's status as an unrecognized state adds another layer of complexity.
So it's like smooth sailing on the surface,
Yeah,
but with some potentially choppy waters beneath.
exactly. But the fact that both parties are committed to a peaceful and collaborative approach, even with these challenges looming, is significant. It's a testament to their belief in the long-term benefits of cooperation. They're playing the long game.
It's almost like they're setting a new precedent for conflict resolution in a region riddled with tension. That's quite a bold statement. But we've only scratched the surface of this story. We've talked about Ethiopia's landlocked situation, their partnership with Somaliland, and the potential for a positive regional impact. But what does this development mean for the world at large? How does this fit into the global landscape?
That's where things get even more interesting. Ethiopia, despite its challenges, is a major player in East Africa. It's one of the fastest growing economies, with a population that's young and eager to participate in the global economy. Improved access to markets through Berbera could be the catalyst that propels them onto the world stage.
So not just talking about a regional trade deal, we're talking about a potential global power emerging from the heart of Africa. But how does this impact the everyday lives of people in Ethiopia?
That's where the rubber meets the road. Increased trade translates to job creation across various sectors. We're talking about better infrastructure, more reliable access to goods and services, and a potential surge in foreign investment. These are the tangible changes that can uplift communities and improve lives.
It's easy to get lost in the geopolitical maneuvering, but at the end of the day, it's about people. It's about empowering them to build a better future.
And speaking of empowerment, I'm curious about the international community's role in all of this. The international community has a crucial role to play, from development partners like the World Bank and the African Development Bank to individual nations. Their support, whether financial, diplomatic, or technical, can significantly impact the success of this endeavor.
So it sounds like a global team effort to help Ethiopia reach its full potential.
Mm-hmm.
And when we talk about full potential, what does that actually look like? What's the end game here?
Imagine a prosperous and interconnected Horn of Africa. Ethiopia, with its newfound access to global markets, becomes a major hub for trade and investment, pulling the entire region into its orbit. It's a vision where borders become bridges, where collaboration triumphs over conflict, and where the potential of this dynamic region is finally unleashed.
That's a pretty inspiring vision. It's a reminder that even in the face of seemingly insurmountable challenges, there's always a path forward.
Exactly, and that path often begins with taking the first step, no matter how daunting it might seem.
Well, we've covered a lot of ground today, exploring the motivations, the mechanics, and the potential impact of Ethiopia's ambitious quest. But there's so much more to unpack.
Indeed. The historical and geopolitical complexities that shape this story are fascinating. And there are potential obstacles and opportunities that deserve a closer look. You know, before we move forward, I think it's crucial to understand the historical baggage that comes with this whole thing. This pursuit of maritime independence, it wasn't always smooth sailing, so to speak.
Right. We touched upon Ethiopia's previous access to the Red Sea through Eritrea. And that relationship has been, well, let's just say it's complicated.
Complicated is putting it mildly. The Eritrean War of Independence, which spanned 3 decades, left deep scars on both nations. Even after Eritrea gained independence, tensions remained high, culminating in a border war in the late 1990s.
So imagine being a landlocked nation, reliant on your neighbor, with whom you have this long history of conflict, for your only access to the sea. That's got to be a recipe for instability, right?
Precisely. Relying on ports in a country where the political winds could shift at any moment is a major vulnerability. That's one of the reasons why this agreement with Somaliland is so strategically significant. It's a clean slate, a chance to forge a new partnership based on mutual economic interests, rather than this heavy historical baggage.
So it's not just about securing access to the sea then. It's about mitigating risk, about taking control of their own destiny. But let's talk about Somaliland for a second. You know, for many of our listeners, this might be their first time hearing about this semi-autonomous region, so give us the rundown.
Sure. Somaliland declared independence from Somalia back in 1991, a move that hasn't been formally recognized by the international community. Yet, despite this lack of official recognition, they have a functioning government, their own currency, and a remarkably stable political system, especially considering that they're in a region often marred by instability.
Wow. It's pretty amazing that they've managed to build something so resilient in the middle of all that chaos. But I imagine it must be frustrating, to be functioning as a de facto state
Yeah.
without that official stamp of approval from the rest of the world.
Absolutely. It's definitely a source of frustration for them. But Somaliland is determined to chart its own course, and this agreement with Ethiopia plays a crucial role in that strategy. It really puts them on the map, attracting attention from investors and potential allies. It's like they're sending a signal. Hey, we're open for business. We're ready to play a key role in regional development.
So in a way, this partnership with Ethiopia is giving them a platform, a voice on the international stage that they wouldn't have otherwise.
Exactly. They're leveraging their strategic location and their resources to gain influence. It's a smart play. It highlights how interconnected these regional dynamics really are.
Absolutely. But, let's not get ahead of ourselves. There are still some significant challenges ahead. We've talked about some of them, the logistical complexities, the infrastructural limitations. But what are some of the other potential roadblocks they might encounter?
Well, for starters, the Horn of Africa is a notoriously volatile region. Conflicts, political instability, security threats, those are all factors that could disrupt even the best laid plans.
Right. And then there's the issue of piracy, too. It's a persistent threat, especially in the waters off the coast of Somalia.
Yeah. Safeguarding those maritime trade routes will definitely be a top priority.
That's a sobering thought. It's easy to get caught up in the excitement of this whole new trade route, but security is paramount. Speaking of which, what about Somaliland's infrastructure? Are they equipped to handle the increase in trade volume? The surge that this agreement is likely to bring?
That's another critical aspect. Berbera Port will need significant upgrades to accommodate larger ships and the increased cargo traffic. And then there are the road and rail connections between Ethiopia and Berbera. Those need improvement too. We're talking about a massive undertaking here. It's going to require substantial investment and a coordinated effort from both countries.
So it's not just about, signing an agreement and calling it a day. It's about rolling up your sleeves and doing the hard work, laying the foundation for success. But I imagine, even with all those challenges, there are internal dynamics within Ethiopia that this sea access could influence in a positive way.
Oh, absolutely. This isn't just about boosting Ethiopia's economy on a macro level. Increased trade and investment have the potential to stimulate various sectors within Ethiopia itself. This could lead to more jobs, better living standards. It could even reduce internal tensions by offering a shared path towards prosperity.
So it's like a positive feedback loop. Economic growth leading to greater stability and potentially even peace. But let's be realistic for a second. Not everyone is going to be thrilled about this agreement. What are some of the criticisms and concerns that have been raised?
One major concern is that by partnering so closely with Somaliland, Ethiopia is implicitly legitimizing their claim to independence, which could further strain relations with Somalia.
Ah, yes. The delicate dance of regional politics. Every move you make has repercussions. And what about the impact on Djibouti? They've been Ethiopia's primary gateway to the sea for so long. Are they going to be sidelined by this new partnership?
That's a question a lot of people are asking. Some view this as a zero-sum game, where Ethiopia's gain is Djibouti's loss. But Ethiopia has been very clear about their intentions. They want to diversify trade routes, not replace existing partnerships.
Right. It's that concept of spreading the risk, not putting all your eggs in one basket. Makes sense from a business perspective. But remains to be seen how Djibouti will react in the long run.
Exactly. Actions often speak louder than words, especially in geopolitics. It's a situation that requires careful monitoring. But let's zoom out for a moment. What does Ethiopia's quest for sea access tell us about the broader shifts happening across the African continent?
That's a great question. We've been so focused on the specifics of this agreement, it's easy to lose sight of the bigger picture.
Right. Africa is a continent on the move. It's experiencing rapid economic growth, and there's this surge in youthful energy. Countries like Ethiopia, they're not content to be passive recipients of aid anymore or dictated to by external forces. They're asserting their agency, forging their own paths, and demanding a seat at the table of global power.
It's like a coming-of-age story for the continent. They're shedding the old narratives and writing their own future.
Precisely. And Ethiopia's approach, with its emphasis on peaceful negotiation, strategic partnerships, and a long-term vision, is emblematic of this new Africa. It's a message to the world that they're not just a source of resources or a recipient of aid. They're a force to be reckoned with, a source of innovation and opportunity.
It's a powerful message. and one that deserves to be heard, but we've only just begun to explore the depths of this story. There's still the role of international stakeholders to consider, and the potential pitfalls and breakthroughs that lie ahead, and of course, the lessons that other countries can learn from Ethiopia's bold endeavor. All right, so welcome back to our deep dive into Ethiopia's quest for sea access. We've explored the historical context, the strategic partnership with Somaliland, and the potential impact on the Horn of Africa. But there's one crucial piece of the puzzle we haven't really talked about yet, the role of the international community.
Yeah, the international community's involvement, it's crucial to the success of this whole endeavor. Think of it, I don't know, a complex ecosystem. You need all these different elements working in harmony for it to really thrive. Ethiopia's own efforts are essential. But the support of international stakeholders, that can be the catalyst that really amplifies their impact.
Okay, so who are the Heritage? Who are the key players on this global stage? And what kind of support can they actually bring to the table?
Well, you have development partners like the World Bank, the African Development Bank, various UN agencies. These institutions, they can provide financial assistance for those massive infrastructure projects we talked about, the port upgrades, road and rail networks, the backbone of this whole trade corridor. They can also offer technical expertise and capacity building programs to strengthen Ethiopia's institutions and make sure their development is sustainable.
It's like providing the tools and the training wheels to help Ethiopia navigate this new path.
Yeah, exactly. But it goes beyond just financial and technical support. You also have individual nations, like the United States, China, the European Union. They can wield significant influence through diplomatic channels, trade agreements, and foreign direct investment.
So it's like having a network of powerful allies, opening doors on the global stage, and vouching for Ethiopia's credibility. But why should the international community care about this? What's in it for them?
Well, that's where Ethiopia's strategic approach comes in. They've been very good at framing this issue, not just as a national priority, but as a regional and even global opportunity.
Okay, I like that. Unpack that a little bit for us. How does Ethiopia benefiting from this translate into a win for the rest of the world?
Okay, well, imagine a stable, prosperous Ethiopia, a regional economic powerhouse in East Africa. That translates to greater stability in the Horn of Africa, a region that's often plagued by conflict and instability. It reduces the risk of humanitarian crises, creates more attractive environment for foreign investment, and opens up new trade routes that benefit not just Ethiopia, but neighboring countries as well.
So it's not just about charity, it's about recognizing that. A rising tide lifts all boats, right? A prosperous Ethiopia contributes to a more stable and prosperous world.
Exactly. And don't forget about the economic potential. Ethiopia's economy is growing at a rapid pace, and their young population, they're eager to connect to the global marketplace. Supporting their growth means new markets, new investment opportunities. It's a potential boost to the global economy as a whole.
Yeah, it sounds like a long-term investment with potentially huge returns for everyone involved. But let's be realistic. The world of geopolitics, it's rarely that simple. Are there any potential downsides or risks for the international stakeholders?
Of course, there are always complexities and potential pitfalls to consider. Some countries might be hesitant to support Somaliland too openly, for fear of jeopardizing their relationship with Somalia, which still claims Somaliland as part of its territory.
All right, it's that delicate balancing act we talked about earlier. And what about China's growing influence in Africa? I mean, some in the West might be a bit wary of that, especially with Ethiopia's close ties with China, particularly when it comes to infrastructure development.
Yeah, that's a valid concern, and it's definitely something that Western powers are watching closely. But it's also important to remember that African nations have the right to choose their own partners and their own development paths. It's not about forcing them into a particular mold. It's about supporting their aspirations in a way that respects their sovereignty.
It's about being a partner, not a dictator. So given all these complexities, what's the best approach for the international community? How can they effectively support Ethiopia's ambition while navigating all these potential pitfalls?
I think the key is to strike a balance between support and interference, offering assistance without imposing conditions, encouraging good governance and transparency without dictating terms. It's about empowering Ethiopia to succeed on its own terms, while still upholding those international standards and values.
So it's like being a mentor, not a micromanager. But where do things stand right now? What are some of the key developments we've seen in terms of international support?
Well, there's been a lot of positive momentum so far. The World Bank has already pledged a significant amount of funding, For infrastructure projects, the African Union has expressed its strong support for Ethiopia's efforts, and various individual nations have signed trade agreements and offered their technical expertise.
It sounds like Ethiopia is building a pretty impressive coalition of support. But what about the long game? What are the key things to watch for in the coming years as this project unfolds?
Well, I think the true measure of success will be the tangible impact on the ground. Will those infrastructure projects actually be completed? Will those trade agreements translate into increased economic activity? And most importantly, will we see a real improvement in the lives of ordinary Ethiopians?
It's about moving beyond the rhetoric and seeing real, measurable progress. And speaking of progress, let's zoom out one last time and think about the bigger picture here. What lessons can other countries learn from this, particularly those facing similar challenges?
I think there are some valuable lessons here for anyone striving to overcome geographical limitations or break free from those historical constraints. First and foremost, the power of peaceful diplomacy, seeking solutions through dialogue and collaboration, even when you're dealing with historical adversaries.
It's that idea that cooperation can often achieve more than confrontation.
Right, exactly. And then there's the importance of strategic partnerships, understanding that. By leveraging each other's strength, nations can achieve far more than they could on their own.
It's a reminder that sometimes the best way to overcome a challenge is to find the right partner and work together towards a shared goal.
Precisely. And finally, there's the crucial element of resilience and determination. Ethiopia's journey. It's a testament to the power of vision, the unwavering belief in one's own potential, and the commitment to charting a new course, even when faced with what seem like insurmountable obstacles.
It's a really inspiring story. It reminds us that limitations can sometimes be the catalyst for innovation, and that the pursuit of a bold vision, with the right mix of strategy, partnership, and perseverance, can lead to some truly transformative change.
It's a reminder that geography doesn't have to define destiny.
Well said. And folks, that brings us to the end of our deep dive into Ethiopia's quest for sea access. We've explored the complexities, the challenges, and the incredible potential of this ambitious endeavor. We hope this has been an insightful journey for you, leaving you with a deeper understanding of the forces shaping the Horn of Africa and the power of human ingenuity to reshape the world around us. Keep those brain gears turning. And we'll catch you on our next deep dive